I wanted to tell the story of what happened when I went through the first stage of awakening, sort of leading up to it, and what it was like for me. More of a sort of a story format, I guess, because I don't know. I honestly enjoy telling the story. It's kind of nice to relive it, and I mean, I think other people who are seeking that first step of awakening to sort of get into the whole process, it may give you some ideas of what may happen when you hit that point. Mine was especially dramatic. I mean, I've heard the people I've guided and a lot of other people that I've read about and meet online and things like that. It's rarely as dramatic as it was for me for some reason. I think I was just holding on to the separation very strongly, and it just affected me a lot. But anyway, I'll get into it. So, I mean, I was seeking for many years. Don't remember how long exactly, maybe three years intensely. Leading up to that, I mean, I tried the standard stuff that we all try to sort of fill up that desperate hole inside. So, started out, when you're young, you play sort of athletics and sports, and then it led me to music, which I sort of just did up until my drug use began and started to get out of control. And then I went to money, work, relationships, sports, things like that. Right at the end there, just before it all started, I went to my sort of belief then was that having good social skills would make me happy, and so I was kind of in a lot of those sort of circles that are dedicated to improving their social skills. And that was where I was introduced by a friend to the Jed McKenna books, and that sort of got me started on the whole awakening thing. I was always sort of interested in it to a degree, but until I read that, I mean, after reading that, I just realized that was what was gonna do it for me. There was sort of no other answers. I tried everything. I was still empty. Still felt deficient. So then I just dedicated myself for a few years there, 2 to 3 years maybe, doing all this standard stuff. So the standard sort of self-inquiry meditation and writing and just reading books and meditation and all of that sort of stuff. And nothing really got me anywhere. I was just sitting there asking, who am I, and waiting for an answer. So after a few years, it was sort of, I was at this point very desperately seeking. I was increasing the self-inquiry to hours a day, morning and night, and just really going at it with everything. And then I think I was Googling stuff online, and I found a book by the people that made that website, Liberation Unleashed, one of their free books online, and I read that, and it was just about people being guided through that first step of awakening by the people that made that sort of website. And it just seemed so simple, and there was just so many people going through that step quite quickly, quite easily, and it did something to me in my head. I just thought that I was seeking like crazy and just not getting anywhere. But then these people just come along and they see through it within I don't know, a matter of days or even a couple of weeks. So something was wrong, and it just lit a fire under my ass. What I noticed is they were doing things a bit differently to the traditional methods. I think we get a lot of the self-inquiry methods and that sort of thing from, I think maybe Buddhism is a big part of it, and a lot of, I think, Hinduism and that sort of stuff traditionally. But it's more, that stuff is more centered on just trying to be what you are. So, I mean, we are consciousness, we are the fabric of the universe, we aren't these body, minds, emotions. And so the theory is if you just sit there and try to be enlightened as though resting your consciousness on itself will eventually trigger it, but it just doesn't seem to work. There's a lot of failures. I mean, some people get it, but it's just a hit and miss thing. Maybe after 30 years they might get it, but it just doesn't seem to work for that many people. But this method I was finding was working for the majority of people. And after I'd gone through it all, when I started guiding people as well, I found that those with the proper intentions and the sort of the fire lit under them, they get it, and they get it fast with these methods. And I think the name of it is the direct pointing method. So basically, the book was just they're just directly pointing clients on where to look. So, for example, look at the sensations in the body and ask it, is that me? Or look here, look there. Try to actually, actively find this self that we're all that we assume is there. And it was different to the usual methods I was doing, this sort of self-inquiry method, because it was more direct. It was actively looking for the self rather than just asking a question or resting the consciousness on the breathing or whatever and waiting for something to happen. You're actively looking for it. And so I just, I think I barely ate, and I didn't sleep for about, 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours. And that's all I was doing, was just looking. Read the book a couple of times through, and I was just looking and looking and looking. I remember at one point I was sitting in this park near my house, and I'll never forget it. I think it was getting later towards night, and I was basically alone, just sitting there on this sort of exercise post thingy. And I remember just all these thoughts going through my head, just about thinking of Buddha and Jesus and what they would have went through. And I just kept thinking, I remember the story about Buddha, how he sat under the tree and just refused to get up until he'd made it. And that's kind of what I felt like at that time. I was like, look, I don't care if it kills me. I'm going to get there. I'm not leaving until I do. And I just remember just being on fire, just looking into the body and my consciousness just beaming through everything, just the feelings in my arms. I remember just repeatedly asking, why do I think this is me? Why? And looking and trying to find this self like crazy. And then eventually I did give up in that spot. So I didn't stay there, like I said. But then I went home, and I think I was just exhausted. And then I remember going to bed and just lying there, and suddenly this thought came, which was because I had a sort of, I have a lot of stories in my head about my childhood, because it wasn't the happiest childhood. And I remember thinking at that time, these stories of my childhood are just stories that are created to enhance this sense of me. It was some thought basically like that, and then suddenly, click, something changed. My heart started racing. Something was different, and I was sort of panicking, and I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know it at that stage what was happening. And then I was just sort of got out of bed. I think I was pacing up and down. I was like, what has happened? And I remember going for I can't remember what happened then. I remember being in my room for a while, and then this typical question came up eventually, which was the one that I would ask when doing self-inquiry. And it would be something like, who am I? And I would ask that question, and then suddenly the question didn't make sense. It didn't point to anything. I wasn't this body anymore. And it was just, that was the moment where I realized, holy shit, I'd done it. I'd actually done it. It was something that, you work for so many years. And you put so much time into it, and the whole time you doubt that it's even something that exists, which we all do before it. And then it happens, and it's just bewildering. It's nothing like I could have ever thought or imagined. It's the nature of it is it can't be what we think it might be. And then I remember, for some reason, driving around and just saying to myself, what the fuck is going on? Something was just completely different. And from there, I couldn't sleep for, I think it was 2 or 3 days where I just could barely sleep. And I look back now, and I reckon it was because the self is that initial step of self is just held on so tightly that my body felt like it was missing something, and that it was being attacked, or that it was in danger. So it just released this bunch of adrenaline for a period of days, and I couldn't sleep, and it was just sort of protecting itself. I think similar to if a part of your body was cut off, the body might react in the same way. And so I couldn't sleep for a few days, and I couldn't eat. I wasn't hungry, and it was just a mess. And I remember during that time just thinking about how everything I've ever done in my life was just a complete lie. Now that I knew the truth, or at least a portion of the truth, I knew what I was, that I wasn't this body. I was, the unity or consciousness or the fabric of the universe, whatever you want to call it. And because I knew that now, I realized that everything, all the goals that I'd ever have, all these crazy things that I tried to do and achieve and be and change and self-development, all the money and time and effort I put into all of it, my whole life constructed on a complete lie. And it just got to me. I had this deep sense of grief. I was, yeah, I mean, it was crazy. The scariest part of it was, I think it was I don't know, a matter of hours after this whole thing, I was driving around and I started to hear these really loud voices in my head laughing at me and sort of telling me things like, you're finished now, you're dead, just kill yourself, crash the car into a tree, some really violent sort of suicidal thoughts, I guess, different to what I've ever had before. It just seemed so real and vivid and I couldn't disconnect from it. And I panicked. I thought I was going to do it. I really thought that it was over for me, that I may as well die because I'm finished, the body's dead. And I called one of my friends, and she, without her, I may not be here today. And I said, look, I've really got to see you. I'm freaking out. And she doesn't go through it herself, but she's a Buddhist, so she kind of gets it, and I think she likes to listen anyway. And yeah, I went and met up with my friend, and that saved me. I was just panicking so much. Everything just fell down, and the interesting thing about it, at the same time, there was this sense of joy. I think that initial explosive release that happens with that initial step did create a sense of joy behind it all. Sort of very temporary, and that did last for a few days, though, I remember. And yeah, from there it was just, I mean, I kept going to work and everything, and it was just trying to learn what everything meant anymore and what was worth doing and everything like that, just sort of learning, and eventually it just sort of faded away. It was always there, but it just sort of, the newness of it, I guess, faded away, and things basically got back to normal. Then within a few months I started to suffer again, maybe even worse than before. But I'll get to all that in another video where I'll let you guys know how I activated the step, the second phase of it for me anyway, how that all worked. But yeah, that's basically what happened to me. Hopefully it's not too dramatic for you. But yeah, you may reach out if you have any questions, or if you're going through anything similar. It does, if you're having those crazy thoughts like I did, just hold on. Don't take any action. Be with someone. Talk to me if you want, or do what you need to do. It will go away, and things are guaranteed to get better. Cheers, guys.